The Zephyrian cargo ship Stellar Wanderer drifted through the Andromeda trade route like a wounded beast, its hull scarred by plasma burns and micrometeorite impacts. Captain Thexera clutched the control console with his four-fingered hands, watching helplessly as the ship's life support systems flickered between amber and red warnings. Behind him, his crew of 12 worked frantically to keep their vessel operational, but everyone knew they were fighting a losing battle. "Captain," called out Navigator Yilneth from her station, her crystalline voice tinged with desperation. "The hyperdrive is completely offline. We're stuck in this system until we can find replacement parts, or—" She didn't finish the sentence. Everyone aboard knew what the alternative was. Thexera studied the tactical display showing their current location. They had dropped out of hyperspace in an unremarkable star system on the outer rim of civilized space. 3 planets orbited a dying orange star, and according to their sensors, only one showed signs of life. The third planet from the star registered as habitable, with oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere and moderate temperatures. More importantly, it was broadcasting radio signals. "What kind of civilization are we looking at?" Thexera asked, his mandibles clicking with nervous energy. Chief Science Officer Koldan manipulated his holographic interface, pulling up detailed scans of the planet below. "Primitive by galactic standards, Captain. They've barely achieved nuclear fission and haven't even established permanent colonies beyond their homeworld. The dominant species appears to be bipedal, carbon-based, with only 2 arms and 2 legs. Quite crude, really. Any signs of hostility?" Thexera inquired, remembering past encounters with pre-spaceflight civilizations that had proven unexpectedly dangerous. "Negative, sir. They appear to be engaged in some kind of planet-wide celebration. Our communications array is picking up transmissions filled with what their translation algorithms interpret as songs about peace, joy, and something called Christmas spirit. Whatever that means." Thexera considered their options. His ship carried a cargo hold full of ornamental artifacts from 12 different worlds, valuable decorative items meant for the luxury markets of the core worlds. These ornaments were their livelihood, but they were useless if the crew died in the vacuum of space. The primitive planet below might have the basic materials needed to repair their hyperdrive, but dealing with pre-contact species was always complicated. "Sir," interrupted Communications Officer Rixtel, "I'm detecting multiple distress signals from across this sector. It appears we're not the only ones having troubles." The main screen flickered to life, displaying a 3-dimensional map of local space. Red markers indicated distress beacons from over 30 vessels scattered throughout the system. Thexera's stomach dropped. This wasn't coincidence. Something or someone was systematically targeting ships in this region. Analysis Koldan. What could cause this many ship failures in such a concentrated area? The science officer's tentacles writhed with concentration as he processed the data. "The pattern suggests technological sabotage, Captain. Each vessel appears to have suffered critical failures in their most essential systems: hyperdrive, life support, navigation. It's as if someone or something specifically targeted the components necessary for interstellar travel." "Pirates," suggested Weapons Officer Nexka, his rocky carapace shifting as he adjusted his stance. "No," Thexera said slowly, a terrible realization dawning on him. "Pirates want cargo, not disabled ships floating in space. This is something else entirely." As if summoned by his words, the ship's proximity alarms began screaming. On the main display, a massive vessel materialized from behind the system's second planet, its dark hull seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. The ship was unlike anything in their databases, angular and menacing, covered in spikes and protrusions that served no apparent aerodynamic purpose. It was clearly designed to intimidate. "Incoming transmission," announced Rixtel, his voice barely above a whisper. On screen, Thexera commanded, straightening to face whatever was about to contact them. The bridge lights dimmed as a figure appeared on their main display. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, with elongated limbs and a gaunt face dominated by large, glowing red eyes. Its skin was a sickly green color, and it wore what appeared to be a tattered red robe decorated with twisted metal ornaments that looked suspiciously like the decorative artifacts from various worlds. "Greetings, travelers," the creature said, its voice a mixture of silk and steel that made everyone on the bridge involuntarily shudder. "I am Grixthal, the Ornament Collector, and you have entered my domain during the most wonderful time of the year, for me at least." "What do you want?" Fexera demanded, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Grixthal's thin lips curved into what might have been a smile if it weren't so unsettling. "Oh, Captain, it's not what I want. It's what I need. You see, I have dedicated my existence to collecting the most beautiful, meaningful ornamental artifact from across the galaxy. Christmas ornaments, Diwali lights, harvest festival totems, winter solstice crystals, all of them. Every culture's most cherished decorative traditions. And you steal them," Koldan accused, his scientific mind cutting straight to the obvious conclusion. "Steal is such an ugly word," Grixthal replied, his red eyes gleaming brighter. "I prefer to think of it as liberating these beautiful objects from beings who don't truly appreciate them. After all, what is the point of hanging a precious ornament on a tree for a few weeks when I can preserve it forever in my collection?" Fexera felt his crew's fear radiating through the bridge. "You're the one disabling the ships." "Guilty as charged," Grixthal laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "I have perfected a rather elegant electromagnetic pulse that specifically targets the systems needed for escape. Don't worry, I'm not a monster. I leave you with enough life support to survive until you hand over your ornaments. After that, well, you're free to go, assuming you can repair your ship with whatever scraps you can find. And if we refuse?" Nexka growled, his warrior instincts flaring despite the hopelessness of their situation. Grixthal's expression didn't change, but the temperature on the bridge seemed to drop several degrees. "I don't think you understand, my crystalline friend. I have been collecting ornaments for over 2 centuries. In that time, I have never encountered a species that valued their decorations more than their lives. You will give me what I want, or you will drift in space until your life support fails. The choice, as they say, is yours." Fexera looked around his bridge, seeing the resignation in his crew's faces. They all knew their cargo hold was filled with ornamental artifacts worth a small fortune. Ceremonial masks from Vega Prime, crystal sculptures from the Orion Nebula colonies, traditional wind chimes from the methane worlds of Tau Ceti. These items represented months of careful trading and negotiation, but they were still just objects. "How do we know you'll honor your word and let us go?" Fexera asked, though he was already calculating how long it would take to transfer their cargo. "Because, my dear Captain, I am many things, but I am not a liar. I want your ornaments, not your lives. Dead beings can't create new decorations for me to collect in the future." Grixthal gestured to something off-screen, and the image widened to show a massive cargo bay filled with countless ornamental objects from dozens of worlds. "As you can see, my collection is quite extensive, but there's always room for more." The sight was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Fexera could identify artifacts from at least 20 different civilizations, each one representing centuries of cultural tradition and artistic achievement. They hung suspended in individual stasis fields, forever preserved, but forever removed from the beings who had created them with love and hope. "I'll need time to prepare the cargo transfer," Fexera said finally, his heart heavy with defeat. "Of course," Grixthal replied graciously. "You have exactly 1 standard hour. I find that deadline helps beings focus on what's truly important." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. "Captain," whispered Navigator Yilneth, "what about the primitive world below? Maybe we could send a distress signal." Fexera shook his head sadly. "They don't even have interplanetary travel, Yilneth. What could they possibly do against something that's been terrorizing space-faring civilizations for 2 centuries? Unknown to the crew of the Stellar Wanderer, their conversation was being monitored by more than just Grixthal. Deep in the Colorado mountains of Earth, a joint facility operated by NASA, the European Space Agency, and several other international organizations have been tracking unusual activity in their star system for the past 3 days. What had started as routine monitoring of space debris had evolved into something far more significant. Dr. Sarah Chun stared at her computer screen, watching the translated communications between the alien vessels with growing excitement and concern. "Colonel Martinez, you need to see this," she called to the military liaison officer assigned to the facility. Colonel Martinez approached Dr. Chen's workstation, his weathered face reflecting skepticism. "More alien chatter, Doc." "It's not chatter, Colonel. These are distress calls. Someone or something is systematically attacking alien spacecraft in our star system, and they're talking about ornaments. Christmas ornaments." The colonel's expression shifted from skepticism to interest. "Come again." Dr. Chun pulled up the translated transcript of the most recent exchange. "This creature, Grixthal, is apparently some kind of interstellar ornament thief. He's been stealing decorative artifact from dozens of civilizations, and now he's got over 30 ships trapped in our system. And this affects Earth how exactly?" Colonel Martinez asked, though his tone suggested he was beginning to understand the implications. "Colonel, tomorrow is Christmas Eve. If this thing learns about Earth's Christmas traditions..." Dr. Chun didn't need to finish the sentence. Both she and the colonel could imagine what would happen if a creature obsessed with collecting ornaments discovered a planet where billions of people simultaneously decorated trees, hung lights, and displayed countless beautiful ornaments. "We need to contact the Joint Chiefs," Colonel Martinez said, reaching for his secure phone. "And probably the President." As alarm bells began ringing in military installations across Earth, 8-year-old Emma Patterson was in her bedroom in suburban Denver, carefully hanging her favorite ornament on the small Christmas tree her parents had allowed her to have in her room. The ornament was nothing special by adult standards. A simple glass ball painted with a snowman and the words "Emma's first Christmas" in her mother's careful handwriting. But to Emma, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. She had no idea that her simple act of Christmas decoration was about to become the center of an intergalactic conflict that would determine the fate of countless civilizations. She had no idea that somewhere above her head, alien beings were being forced to surrender their most treasured possessions to a creature who saw beauty only as something to be hoarded. All Emma knew was that Christmas was coming, and she wanted everything to be perfect. In the depths of space, Grixthal, the ornament collector, reviewed his latest acquisitions with satisfaction. The Zephyrian cargo ship had surrendered its valuable cargo without much fuss, adding several dozen exquisite pieces to his collection. The crystalline wind chimes from Tau Ceti were particularly lovely, and the ceremonial mass would look perfect in his display case dedicated to facial ornaments. But as his sensors swept the system for additional targets, they detected something that made his ancient heart skip a beat. The third planet, the one with the primitive civilization, was absolutely glowing with electromagnetic signatures consistent with massive decorative displays. Millions upon millions of individual ornamental lights were being activated simultaneously across the planet's surface, creating the largest display of decorative artifacts he had ever encountered. For the first time in 2 centuries, Grixthal smiled with genuine pleasure rather than predatory satisfaction. He had found the ultimate prize. The primitive world below was about to learn why the galaxy had come to fear the name of Grixthal the Ornament Collector. And high above Earth's atmosphere, the crew of the Stellar Wanderer watched helplessly as the massive dark ship began moving toward the blue-green world below, carrying with it the potential destruction of humanity's most beloved holiday. But in her bedroom in Denver, 8-year-old Emma Patterson continued hanging ornaments on her tree, humming Silent Night to herself as the first snow of winter began to fall outside her window. She had no idea that the fate of Christmas itself, not just on Earth, but throughout the entire galaxy, was about to rest in her small hands. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine whether the spirit of Christmas could triumph over the cold efficiency of a creature who saw beauty only as something to be possessed, never shared. And somewhere in the darkness of space, 37 alien crews held their breath and wondered if the primitive beings below could somehow accomplish what no spacefaring civilization had managed in 200 years. The galaxy's greatest ornament thief was about to meet his match in the form of a small human child who understood something that Grixthal had forgotten long ago, that the true magic of Christmas ornaments wasn't in owning them, but in the joy they brought to others when shared with love. The war room deep beneath NORAD hummed with activity as military and scientific personnel worked frantically to analyze the alien threat approaching Earth. General Harrison stood at the center of it all, his steel-gray hair reflecting the glow of dozens of monitors displaying real-time data about the alien vessels in their star system. "Talk to me, people," General Harrison commanded, his voice cutting through the controlled chaos. "What exactly are we dealing with?" Dr. Chin stepped forward, clutching a tablet filled with translated alien communications. "Based on our intercepted transmissions, the hostile vessel belongs to an entity calling itself Grixthal. He's apparently been operating in this region for over 2 centuries, stealing what he calls ornamental artifacts from various civilizations." "Ornaments," Colonel Martinez added, still struggling to process the absurdity of the situation. "We're potentially facing an alien invasion over Christmas decorations." "It's not that simple," Dr. Chin replied, pulling up a holographic display showing Earth from space. The planet was dotted with millions of bright points of light, each representing Christmas displays across the inhabited continents. "Look at this from his perspective. Our planet is currently hosting the largest ornamental display in recorded galactic history. Every culture on Earth has some form of winter holiday decoration, but Christmas has become a global phenomenon. We're talking about billions of individual ornaments, lights, and decorative displays all activated simultaneously." General Harrison studied the display with growing unease. "So we're essentially a giant Christmas tree floating in space, and this Grixthal character collects Christmas trees." "Exactly," Dr. Chun confirmed. "And according to the alien communications we've intercepted, he's never encountered anything like this before. To him, Earth isn't just another planet. It's the ultimate treasure trove." "What about our defenses?" General Harrison asked, turning to Colonel Martinez. "Can our current military capabilities handle this threat?" Colonel Martinez consulted his own tablet, his expression grim. "That's the problem, sir. Based on the alien ship's capabilities, specifically its ability to disable over 30 advanced spacecraft with some kind of electromagnetic pulse, our conventional weapons might not be effective. This thing has technology that's clearly centuries ahead of ours. So we're defenseless," General Harrison stated flatly. "Not necessarily," Dr. Chun interjected, her voice carrying a note of hope. "I've been studying the communication patterns between Grixthal and his victims. There's something interesting about his psychology. He doesn't seem to enjoy violence or destruction for its own sake. He's more like an obsessive collector who happens to have overwhelmingly superior technology." "What's your point, Doctor?" "My point is that he might be open to negotiation, especially if we can offer him something he wants more than the destruction of our planet." General Harrison was about to respond when alarms began blaring throughout the facility. On the main screen, a new contact appeared. The dark alien vessel was breaking orbit around the outer planets and heading directly for Earth. "Time to impact," General Harrison barked. "Approximately 6 hours at current velocity," reported the tracking officer. "Options." Colonel Martinez stepped forward. "We could attempt to intercept with our most advanced fighters, but frankly, sir, it would be suicide. Our best bet might be to try opening communications and see if Dr. Chun is right about negotiation being possible." Meanwhile, aboard Grixthal's vessel, the ancient collector stood in his private chambers, surrounded by the fruits of 2 centuries of dedicated acquisition. Ornamental artifact from countless worlds hung, suspended in individual stasis fields, each one representing the highest artistic achievement of its respective civilization. Crystal formations that sang with the wind from the gas giants of Altair. Bioluminescent sculptures that pulsed with the heartbeat of their creators from the forest worlds of Vega. ceremonial masks carved from the living stone of the asteroid cities near Proxima Centauri. But for all their individual beauty, Grixthal felt an emptiness that he couldn't quite name. Each acquisition brought temporary satisfaction, quickly replaced by the need to find something even more beautiful, even more meaningful. He told himself it was the natural progression of a serious collector, but lately he had begun to wonder if something was missing from his approach. Master called his assistant, a mechanical construct he had built from salvaged parts centuries ago. We are approaching the primitive world. Shall I begin the standard intimidation protocols? Grixthal considered the question while studying the planet through his observation windows. Earth hung before them like a jewel, its blue oceans and white clouds creating a natural beauty that even his extensive collection couldn't match. But what truly captivated him were the countless points of light scattered across the dark portions of the planet, more ornamental displays than he had ever seen in one place. No, he said finally, this world is different. Look at the scope of their decorative efforts. Every continent, every major population center, even isolated settlements are participating in this celebration. This isn't just a few individuals creating beautiful objects. This is an entire species coordinating their artistic efforts on a planetary scale. Shall I begin the collection protocols then, Master? Grixthal paused, something nagging at the back of his mind. In all his years of collecting, he had taken ornaments from civilizations at their moment of celebration. He had stolen harvest festival totems during the height of agricultural celebrations, seized solstice crystals during winter ceremonies, claimed ceremonial masks during coming-of-age rituals. But he had never stopped to consider what those celebrations meant to the beings who created them. Begin a comprehensive scan of the planet's ornamental displays, he ordered instead. I want to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with before we proceed. The mechanical assistant complied, and within minutes, data began streaming across Grixthal's displays. The numbers were staggering. Over 8 billion individual beings participating in various forms of winter celebration, with Christmas being the dominant theme. More than 2 billion decorated trees, countless billions of individual ornaments, light displays visible from space, and synchronized celebrations spanning multiple time zones. Fascinating, Grixthal murmured. They're not just creating ornaments. They're creating a shared experience. The decorations are secondary to the act of decorating together. This was a new concept for the ancient collector. Every other civilization he had encountered treated their ornamental artifacts as precious objects to be displayed and admired. But these humans seemed to view the objects themselves as less important than the process of creating and sharing the displays with others. Master, the assistant interrupted, I'm receiving communication attempts from the planet's surface. Put them through, Grixthal commanded, curious to hear what these primitive beings might have to say. The transmission crackled with static, but the universal translator quickly parsed the alien language. Unknown vessel. This is General Harrison of the United Earth Defense Command. We are aware of your presence and request immediate communication to discuss the situation in our star system. Grixthal smiled, his first genuine smile in decades. These beings didn't even know who he was, yet they were attempting to negotiate. Open a channel, he ordered. Back on Earth, General Harrison stood before a massive communication array, knowing that the next few minutes could determine the fate of human civilization. Unknown vessel, we have been monitoring communications between yourself and other spacecraft in our system. We understand you are collecting ornamental artifacts from various civilizations. There was a pause before the alien voice responded, and when it did, General Harrison was surprised by its cultured, almost refined tone. General Harrison, I am Grixthal, and you are correct about my purpose. Your world has attracted my attention because of the extraordinary scope of your ornamental displays. I have never encountered a civilization that decorates on such a massive scale. We call it Christmas, General Harrison replied carefully. It's a holiday celebrating peace, hope, and goodwill toward others. The decorations are just one part of a larger celebration. Christmas, Grixthal repeated, testing the word. And these decorations, they're displayed only temporarily? That's correct. Most people display them for a few weeks, then store them until the following year. How wasteful, Grixthal observed, though his tone suggested confusion rather than judgment. Why create such beautiful displays only to dismantle them? General Harrison glanced at Dr. Chun, who nodded encouragingly. Because the beauty isn't in the permanence of the display, the general replied. It's in the joy of creating it, sharing it with family and friends, and knowing that millions of other people around the world are doing the same thing at the same time. I don't understand, Grixthal admitted. Then, perhaps, Dr. Chun interjected, stepping closer to the microphone, you'd like to learn. My name is Dr. Sarah Chun, and I'm a cultural anthropologist. Would you be interested in observing our Christmas traditions firsthand before you decide whether to collect our ornaments? The suggestion hung in the air like a challenge. For 2 centuries, Grixthal had approached each new civilization with the same methodology. Identify their most beautiful ornaments, disable their defenses, and collect everything of value. He had never considered actually participating in their celebrations or understanding the cultural context of the artifacts he collected. You would allow me to observe your celebration without resistance? He asked, genuinely intrigued. If you promise not to harm anyone or take anything without permission, Dr. Chun replied boldly, ignoring General Harrison's alarmed expression. Grixthal considered the proposal. He could easily take everything he wanted by force, just as he had done countless times before. But something about this situation felt different. The scale of the human celebration, the apparent joy with which they approached their decorating, the fact that they were willing to share rather than simply surrender. It all suggested that there might be something he had been missing in his centuries of collecting. Very well, he decided. I will observe your Christmas celebration, but understand that I reserve the right to collect any ornaments that particularly appeal to me. Fair enough, Dr. Chun agreed, shooting a look at General Harrison that clearly said, trust me. What would you like to observe from? Somewhere that represents your typical celebration, Grixthal replied. Not your largest displays or most impressive exhibitions, but a normal example of how your people celebrate this Christmas. Dr. Chin's mind raced through possibilities. They needed a location that would showcase the true spirit of Christmas. Not the commercial spectacle of Times Square or Rockefeller Center, but the genuine warmth and joy of a family celebration. I have an idea, she said finally. There's a family in Denver, Colorado. The father is a NASA engineer, so they're already cleared for classified contact. They have an 8-year-old daughter who's especially excited about Christmas this year. 8 years old, Grixthal mused. A juvenile of your species? Children often understand Christmas better than adults do, Dr. Chin explained. They approach it with pure joy and wonder, without the complications that grown-ups sometimes add. Interesting. Very well. Transmit the coordinates, and I will position my vessel for observation. As communication ended, General Harrison turned to Dr. Chun with a mixture of admiration and terror. Doctor, I hope you know what you're doing. You just invited the galaxy's most dangerous ornament thief to study Christmas through the eyes of a little girl. Dr. Chin smiled grimly. General, sometimes the best way to defeat a monster is to remind it how to be human. If Grixthal has been collecting ornaments for 2 centuries without understanding their true purpose, then maybe it's time someone showed him what he's been missing. And if you're wrong, then tomorrow morning, Emma Patterson is going to wake up on Christmas Eve to find her Christmas tree empty, just like every other Christmas tree on Earth. In Denver, completely unaware that an alien spacecraft was adjusting its orbit to observe her house, Emma Patterson was putting the finishing touches on her bedroom Christmas tree. She had spent the entire evening carefully arranging each ornament, making sure that every branch was perfectly balanced, and that her favorite snowman ornament was positioned where she could see it from her bed. Emma, lights out, her mother called from downstairs. Santa won't come if you're not asleep. Just 5 more minutes, Mom. Emma replied, stepping back to admire her work. The small tree glowed with warm white lights, and each ornament told a story. The angel from her grandmother, the handmade star from her art class, the collection of miniature animals that her father brought back from his business trips. She didn't know that high above her house, an ancient being who had stolen countless treasures from across the galaxy was preparing to learn what Christmas really meant. She didn't know that her simple joy in arranging ornaments was about to challenge everything that Grixthal thought he understood about beauty, art, and the purpose of decoration. All Emma knew was that Christmas was almost here, and everything was perfect. But in the depths of space, aboard Grixthal's massive collection vessel, the ancient being stood before his displays of stolen ornaments and felt a strange sensation he hadn't experienced in centuries. For the first time, he was going to observe the cultural context of ornamental display before taking anything. He was going to learn what Christmas meant before he destroyed it. And in the process, he was about to discover that some things were more valuable than the most beautiful ornament in the galaxy. Things that couldn't be stolen, only shared, and couldn't be owned, only experienced. The greatest collection of his career was about to become something he had never expected. A lesson in what it truly meant to give rather than take. Christmas Eve morning dawned crisp and clear in Denver, with a fresh layer of snow covering the suburban landscape like a pristine white blanket. Emma Patterson pressed her face against her bedroom window, watching the snowflakes dance in the early sunlight while her breath fogged the glass. Below in the backyard, her father was hanging the last string of lights on the large evergreen tree that served as the centerpiece of their outdoor Christmas display. "Emma, breakfast," her mother called from downstairs. "Coming, Mom," Emma replied, but she lingered at the window for another moment, admiring how the morning light made every ice crystal sparkle like tiny diamonds. She had no idea that 3 miles above her head, concealed by advanced cloaking technology, an enormous alien spacecraft was conducting the most important observation of its 2-century existence. Aboard his vessel, Grixthal stood before a bank of sensors and displays, studying the Patterson household with the intensity of a scientist examining a new species. His mechanical assistant had spent the night compiling data about human Christmas celebrations, but Grixthal was discovering that statistics and cultural analysis couldn't capture the essence of what he was observing. "Master," the assistant reported, "I have completed my analysis of global Christmas displays. The estimated value of ornamental artifacts currently deployed across the planet exceeds the gross domestic product of most spacefaring civilizations. The collection potential is unprecedented." Grixthal barely acknowledged the report. His attention was focused on the small family below, particularly the young female, who seemed to radiate an enthusiasm that his sensors couldn't quantify. "Tell me about the juvenile," he commanded. Subject designation: Emma Patterson, 8 years old, only offspring of NASA engineer David Patterson and teacher Margaret Patterson. Academic performance above average, no significant behavioral anomalies. Standard human development parameters. No, Greeks interruptive. That's not what I mean. Watch her interactions with the ornamental displays. What do you observe? The mechanical assistant processed video feeds from the Patterson house's morning routine. Emma had spent 10 minutes simply staring at her bedroom Christmas tree before breakfast, then another 5 minutes adjusting the position of a single ornament, apparently to catch the morning light more effectively. Her behavior is inefficient, the assistant concluded. She spends excessive time viewing decorative displays that provide no functional benefit. The energy expenditure does not correspond to any measurable gain. Exactly, Grixthal murmured, but his tone suggested fascination rather than criticism. She gains no material benefit, yet her enthusiasm levels are consistently elevated when interacting with the ornamental displays. There's something occurring here that transcends simple aesthetic appreciation. Down in the Patterson kitchen, Emma bounced excitedly in her chair while her mother prepared pancakes shaped like Christmas trees. Her father sat across from her, reading news on his tablet with an expression of barely concealed concern that Emma was too excited to notice. "Dad," Did you see how the lights on our big tree look with the snow? Emma asked, syrup coating her chin. It's like the whole yard is glowing. David Patterson looked up from his tablet, where classified communications about the alien threat were updating in real time. Dr. Chun had briefed him on the situation, but, looking at his daughter's innocent joy, he couldn't imagine how something as pure as her Christmas excitement could possibly help save the world from an interstellar ornament thief. "It does look beautiful, sweetheart," he replied, forcing his voice to remain calm. "Are you excited for tonight?" "The most excited I've ever been," Emma declared. "I can't wait to see if Santa brings me that new ornament for my tree. The one with the little village inside the snow globe." Margaret Patterson caught her husband's eye, recognizing the worry lines around his eyes, even though he was trying to hide them from Emma. The military personnel who had visited their house the previous evening had been polite, but clearly tense, and their request for permission to monitor the family had been accompanied by warnings that she still couldn't fully process. High above, Grixthal was struggling with concepts that challenged everything he thought he understood about ornamental value. Assistant explained the concept of Santa that the juvenile referenced. "Santa Claus is a mythological figure in human Christmas tradition," the assistant replied. "Adults deceive children into believing that this fictional being will provide gifts in exchange for undefined good behavior throughout the year. The tradition appears to serve no logical purpose and actually reduces the recognition that gift givers receive for their efforts. So the adults sacrifice personal recognition to perpetuate a myth that brings joy to the juveniles." "That appears to be accurate, Master." Grixthal found this behavior utterly baffling. In his 2 centuries of collecting, he had encountered countless civilizations, but he had never observed adults deliberately creating elaborate deceptions solely for the purpose of enhancing children's happiness. The illogical generosity of the act was almost incomprehensible. "Continue monitoring," he ordered. "I need to understand the full scope of these Christmas behaviors before I proceed with collection." As the morning progressed, Grixthal observed the Patterson family's Christmas Eve rituals with growing amazement. Emma spent an hour helping her mother bake cookies, not for their own consumption, but to give to neighbors and mail carriers. David Patterson spent his afternoon helping an elderly neighbor untangle Christmas lights, receiving nothing in return except gratitude. Margaret Patterson wrapped gifts with elaborate care, spending far more time on decorative presentation than would be functionally necessary. Each action seemed to involve giving something of value while expecting nothing material in return. It was the antithesis of everything Grixthal had practiced in his centuries of collecting. "Master," the assistant interrupted his observations, "I am detecting increased military activity on the planet's surface. Multiple governments are coordinating what appears to be a defensive response to our presence." Grixthal examined the tactical displays showing military installations across Earth going to high alert status. Fighter jets were scrambling, missile defense systems were coming online, and communication arrays were broadcasting what his translators identified as evacuation advisories. "They're preparing to fight us," Grixthal observed with something approaching admiration. "They know they cannot win, yet they're willing to resist to protect their ornamental displays. Shall I initiate collection protocols and disable their defense systems, Master?" Grixthal considered the question while watching Emma Patterson carefully hang a handmade ornament on her family's indoor tree. The ornament was objectively unremarkable, a simple construction of paper, glitter, and string that would be worthless in any galactic market. Yet Emma handled it with the same reverence that Grixthal reserved for his most precious acquisitions. "No," he decided. "I want to understand their motivation first. Open a communication channel to Dr. Chun." In the NORAD facility, Dr. Chun was monitoring alien communications when her console lit up with an incoming transmission. "General Harrison, Grixthal is requesting direct communication." "Put him through," General Harrison ordered, hoping that Dr. Chun's gamble was paying off. "Dr. Chun," Grixthal's voice carried a note of confusion that hadn't been present in their earlier conversations. I have been observing human Christmas behavior for several hours, and I find myself perplexed. How so? Dr. Chen asked, settling into her chair. Your species appears to derive satisfaction from giving valuable items to others while expecting nothing in return. This behavior contradicts every principle of acquisition and collection that I have observed in 2 centuries of galactic travel. Dr. Chen smiled, recognizing the opening she had hoped for. Grixthal, can I ask you something? In all your years of collecting ornaments, have you ever experienced the joy of giving one away? The question struck Grixthal like a physical blow. Give one away? But that would diminish the collection. The purpose of acquiring beautiful objects is to preserve them, to display them, He stopped, realizing he couldn't actually finish the sentence. What was the purpose of his collection? He had spent 2 centuries acquiring the most beautiful ornamental artifact from across the galaxy. But to what end? He displayed them in his private chambers where no one else could see them. He preserved them in stasis fields where they would never change or grow. He had created the ultimate collection, but he was also its only audience. To what, Grixthal? Dr. Chun pressed gently. I'm not certain anymore, the ancient collector admitted. I had always assumed that the purpose was obvious. Beautiful objects should be preserved and protected. But preserved for what? Protected for whom? Down in Denver, Emma Patterson was having what she considered one of the best days of her life. She had spent the afternoon making Christmas cards for everyone on her street, carefully drawing pictures and writing personal messages for each neighbor. Her father had driven her around the neighborhood, so she could deliver them personally, and the smiles on people's faces when they received her handmade cards had filled her with a warmth that she couldn't quite describe. Now, as evening approached, she stood in her backyard with her parents, looking up at the Christmas lights they had strung throughout their evergreen tree. The lights twinkled against the darkening sky, and fresh snow had begun to fall, creating what Emma thought was the most beautiful sight in the world. "It's perfect," she whispered, her breath creating small puffs of vapor in the cold air. "What makes it perfect?" her father asked, crouching down to her level. Emma considered the question seriously, her 8-year-old mind working to articulate something that adults often struggled to understand. "It's not just pretty," she said finally. "It's like the lights are happy. And when I look at them, they make me happy too. And when other people see them, they get happy. So the happiness keeps growing and growing until everyone feels it." High above, Grixthal listened to Emma's words through his monitoring systems, and for the first time in 2 centuries, he felt something crack in the carefully constructed logic of his existence. The child had articulated something that he had never considered, that the true value of ornamental beauty might not be in possessing it, but in sharing it. "Master," his mechanical assistant reported, "I have calculated the optimal collection pattern for maximum ornamental acquisition. We can begin with the residential displays and work systematically toward the larger commercial installations." "Assistant," Grixthal said slowly, "what happens to ornamental displays after I collect them? They are cataloged, preserved in stasis fields, and added to your collection for permanent display in your private chambers." "And who views these displays?" "You do, Master. As the collector, you have exclusive access to the preserved ornaments. So I take objects that bring joy to millions of beings and lock them away where only I can see them." The mechanical assistant processed this statement, its logic circuits struggling with the implied criticism. "You preserve them for posterity, Master. Without your intervention, these ornamental artifacts would eventually decay or be destroyed. But at what cost?" Grixthal asked, watching Emma Patterson's face glow with pure happiness as she admired her family's Christmas tree. "What is the value of preserving beauty if it can no longer create the emotions that made it beautiful in the first place?" The question hung in the air of his vast collection chamber, surrounded by thousands of ornamental artifacts from dozens of civilizations. Each one was perfectly preserved, eternally beautiful, and completely divorced from the cultural context and emotional significance that had made it meaningful to its creators. For the first time, Grixthal began to see his collection not as a repository of saved beauty, but as a graveyard of stolen joy. Dr. Chun, he called through the communication system, I believe I need to learn more about this Christmas tradition. Would it be possible for me to observe the celebration more closely? How closely? Dr. Chun asked, her heart beginning to race with possibility. I want to experience Christmas the way the juvenile does, Grixthal replied. I want to understand what I have been missing. On the surface, Emma Patterson was completely unaware that her simple love of Christmas lights was about to transform the galaxy's most feared ornament collector. She was focused on the important task of deciding which cookie to leave for Santa and whether the carrots for his reindeer should be baby carrots or full-sized ones. But high above, an ancient being who had spent 2 centuries stealing joy from others was preparing to learn what it meant to give it back. The greatest heist in galactic history was about to become the greatest gift exchange instead, and at its center was an 8-year-old girl who understood the true magic of Christmas better than any adult in the universe. Christmas Eve was about to become a night that would change not just Earth, but every civilization that Grixthal had stolen from in his long career of collecting beautiful things while destroying their beauty. Christmas Eve evening painted the Denver sky in shades of purple, and gold as snow continued to fall gently across the Patterson neighborhood. Every house on the street twinkled with Christmas lights, creating a corridor of warmth and color that seemed to push back against the winter darkness. In the Patterson backyard, Emma stood at her bedroom window, watching the large evergreen tree that her father had spent all afternoon decorating. She had no idea that high above her, an alien being who had terrorized the galaxy for 2 centuries was experiencing something completely foreign to his nature, doubt about his life's purpose. Aboard his massive collection vessel, Grixthal stood in his private chambers, surrounded by the ornamental treasures of dozens of civilizations. The crystalline wind chimes from Tau Ceti hung motionless in their stasis fields, their song forever silenced. The bioluminescent sculptures from the vegan forest worlds no longer pulsed with life. The ceremonial masks from the asteroid cities showed no emotion, their carved faces frozen in eternal expressions that meant nothing without the cultural context of their celebrations. Assistant, Grixthal called to his mechanical companion. In 2 centuries of collecting, how many beings have I observed who seem truly happy with their ornamental displays? The mechanical construct processed the query, accessing thousands of archived encounters. Defining truly happy presents computational challenges, Master. However, analyzing vocal patterns, facial expressions, and body language, I would estimate that approximately 94.7% of beings from whom you collected ornaments displayed what humans would call happiness when interacting with their decorations. And after I collected their ornaments, happiness indices dropped to near zero in 97.2% of cases. Grixthal felt something twist in his ancient chest, an emotion he couldn't identify, but which felt remarkably uncomfortable. So I have spent 2 centuries systematically destroying happiness across the galaxy. You have preserved beautiful artifacts for posterity, the assistant corrected. The temporary emotional states of the original owners are irrelevant to the long-term value of the collection. But as Grixthal watched Emma Patterson through his sensors, carefully arranging Christmas cookies on a plate for Santa Claus, he began to suspect that the temporary emotional states might be the only thing that truly mattered. Initiate transportation protocol, he ordered suddenly. Master, we haven't completed the collection assessment of the planet's ornamental resources. I'm not collecting anything tonight, Grixthal replied. I'm going to observe Christmas the way the juvenile does. Prepare a transport pod with full environmental protection and cultural camouflage systems. Master, I must protest. Direct contact with pre-spaceflight civilizations violates 17 different galactic protocols, and your personal safety cannot be guaranteed. Grixthal's red eyes glowed with something approaching humor. Assistant, I have just spent the day watching a species that bakes extra food to give to strangers, spends hours decorating for others' enjoyment, and tells elaborate lies to children solely to make them happy. I think my safety is the least of our concerns. Down on Earth, Dr. Chun was monitoring the alien vessel's status from the NORAD facility when her instruments detected an unusual energy signature. General Harrison, something's happening. I'm reading what looks like a small craft separating from the main vessel. General Harrison joined her at the monitoring station. Invasion force? I don't think so, Dr. Chen replied, studying the energy patterns. The craft is too small, maybe single occupant, and it's heading directly for the Patterson house. Should we intercept? Dr. Chen shook her head slowly. If Grixthal wanted to attack, he would have done it hours ago. I think he's actually taken me up on my suggestion to observe Christmas firsthand. Are you insane? You want to let an alien being with unknown capabilities have direct contact with a civilian family? General, that civilian family might be humanity's only hope. If Emma Patterson can show Grixthal what Christmas really means, we might be able to convince him to return the ornaments he's stolen from other civilizations and leave Earth alone. General Harrison stared at her for a long moment. Doctor, you're betting the future of human civilization on the Christmas spirit of an 8-year-old girl. Yes, sir, I am. Meanwhile, in her bedroom, Emma was putting the finishing touches on her bedtime preparations when she noticed something unusual outside her window. A soft, silvery light was descending through the falling snow, moving too smoothly and quietly to be any kind of aircraft she knew about. Mom, Dad, she called downstairs, there's something weird in the backyard. David Patterson's blood ran cold as he heard his daughter's words. The military briefing had prepared him for this possibility, but hearing Emma announce the arrival of an alien visitor still made his heart race. Stay right where you are, Emma. Don't go outside. But Emma, with the fearless curiosity of an 8-year-old, was already pressing her face against the window to get a better look. The silvery object settled gently into their backyard, and after a moment, a door opened in its side. What emerged wasn't the monster she might have expected from science fiction movies, but a tall, thin figure in a flowing red robe that seemed oddly familiar. Cool, she whispered. He looks like the Grinch's alien cousin. Grixthal stepped out of his transport pod and into his first direct experience with a planetary atmosphere in over 50 years. The sensation of actual snowflakes touching his skin was startling. His collection chambers were climate-controlled, and he had forgotten what weather felt like. The cold air carried scents that his artificial environment couldn't replicate. Pine needles, wood smoke from fireplaces, and something else that his enhanced senses identified as fresh-baked cookies. He approached the Patterson house slowly, his enhanced vision taking in details that his orbital sensors had missed. The Christmas lights weren't just randomly placed. They had been arranged with careful attention to color balance and visual flow. The ornaments on the outdoor tree each told a story. Handmade decorations that spoke of personal effort, store-bought items that had been chosen with care, and older pieces that carried the patina of years of handling. It's beautiful, he murmured, and realized he meant something different by the word than he had for the past 2 centuries. Emma, watching from her window, made a decision that her parents would later describe as either incredibly brave or completely insane. She opened her bedroom window and leaned out into the cold night air. Hi, she called down to the tall figure in the red robe. Are you lost? Grixthal looked up, startled by the direct contact. According to his research, human juveniles were supposed to be afraid of strangers, especially ones who looked as unusual as he did. But Emma showed no fear, only the same open curiosity she had displayed toward everything else that day. Yes, he replied, his voice carrying across the quiet yard. I think I might be very lost indeed. Are you looking for Christmas? Emma asked with the serious helpfulness of a child who genuinely wanted to solve his problem. The question struck Grixthal like a physical blow. Was he looking for Christmas? He had come to Earth to collect ornaments, but watching Emma's family throughout the day had shown him that the ornaments were just symbols of something larger and more complex. Yes, he said finally. I believe I am looking for Christmas. Emma considered this seriously. Well, you found it. It's everywhere tonight. Want to come see our tree? Mom made extra cookies. Before Grixthal could respond, David Patterson appeared in the backyard, moving protectively between his daughter and the alien visitor. His hand rested on what Grixthal's enhanced vision identified as a projectile weapon, though the human stance suggested reluctance rather than aggression. "It's all right," Grixthal said, raising his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peaceful intent. "I mean no harm to your family. I have come to understand Christmas." David Patterson studied the alien figure, remembering Dr. Chen's briefing about Grixthal's apparent openness to negotiation. The being before him looked dangerous, tall, gaunt, and clearly not human, but his voice carried genuine uncertainty rather than malice. "Emma, go inside and get your mother," David said without taking his eyes off Grixthal. "But, Dad, he wants to see Christmas. We have the best Christmas on the whole street. Emma, inside. Now." Reluctantly, Emma retreated from the window, but Grixthal could hear her excited voice explaining to her mother that they had a visitor who needed to learn about Christmas. "You're the one the government warned us about," David said, keeping his weapon ready but not aimed directly at Grixthal. "The ornament collector." "I am," Grixthal admitted, "but I'm beginning to think I have been collecting the wrong things." "What do you mean?" Grixthal gestured toward the Christmas tree in the Pattersons' yard, its lights reflecting off the falling snow. "I have spent 2 centuries taking ornamental artifacts from civilizations across the galaxy. I preserve them in perfect condition, catalog them with scientific precision, and displayed them in my private collection. I convinced myself that I was saving beauty from decay and destruction. But today, watching your daughter interact with your Christmas decorations, I realized that I was destroying the very thing I thought I was preserving. The beauty of these objects isn't in their physical form. It's in the emotions they create, the memories they preserve, the connections they forge between beings who care about each other." Margaret Patterson emerged from the house with Emma close behind her, both of them studying the alien visitor with a mixture of caution and curiosity. Emma's mother had the practical composure of someone who dealt with 8-year-olds on a daily basis, which apparently prepared her for almost any unusual situation. "You must be Grixthal," she said calmly. "Emma says you're lost and looking for Christmas." "Your daughter is remarkably perceptive for someone so young," Grixthal replied. "I am indeed lost, and I am beginning to suspect I have been lost for a very long time." "Would you like to come inside?" Margaret asked, ignoring her husband's alarmed expression. "It's Christmas Eve, and nobody should be alone on Christmas Eve." The invitation was so unexpected that Grixthal actually took a step backward. "You would welcome me into your home? Despite knowing what I am?" "You're someone who's far from home during the holidays," Margaret replied matter-of-factly. "That's all I need to know." Emma bounced excitedly. "Yes, come inside. You have to see our indoor tree, and we have hot chocolate, and I can show you my favorite ornaments." As Grixthal followed the Patterson family into their warm, light-filled home, he experienced something that his 2 centuries of collecting had never provided: belonging. The house smelled of cinnamon and pine needles. Christmas lights cast a warm glow throughout the rooms, and Christmas music played softly in the background. But it was Emma's enthusiasm that truly captivated him. She led him from room to room, explaining the significance of each decoration with a passionate intensity that only children could bring to their favorite subjects. The ceramic Santa on the mantelpiece was from her grandmother. The paper snowflakes hanging in the kitchen window were from her art class. The wreath on the front door contained pine cones that she and her parents had collected during a hike in the mountains. "Each decoration tells a story," Grixthal observed. "Exactly," Emma exclaimed, thrilled that someone finally understood. "That's what makes Christmas so special. It's not just pretty things, it's all the memories and feelings that make the pretty things important." In his collection chamber, aboard his ship, Grixthal's mechanical assistant was monitoring his master's biometric readings with growing concern. Heart rate was elevated, brain activity was showing unusual patterns, and emotional stress indicators were off the charts. But Down in the Patterson living room, Grixthal was experiencing something that his instruments couldn't measure: joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy at sharing Emma's excitement over a simple Christmas ornament shaped like a snowman. "This was my very first Christmas ornament," Emma explained, holding the glass ball carefully in her small hands. "Mom and Dad gave it to me when I was a baby. It's not the prettiest one we have, but it's the most special because it was the beginning of all my Christmas memories." Grixthal studied the ornament with eyes that had cataloged artistic treasures from across the galaxy. By any objective measure, it was unremarkable, mass-produced glass with simple painted details. But as Emma held it, her face glowing with love and nostalgia, Grixthal began to understand something that had eluded him for 2 centuries. "The ornament itself isn't the treasure," he said slowly. "It's what the ornament represents to you." "Right," Emma said, carefully hanging the snowman on her tree. "Dad says the best treasures aren't things you can hold. They're feelings you can remember." The words hit Grixthal like a revelation. He thought of his vast collection, thousands of beautiful objects suspended in perfect preservation, completely divorced from the love that had made them meaningful. He had been hoarding treasures while destroying their value. "Emma," he said carefully, "what would you say if someone took your Christmas ornaments away?" Emma's face scrunched up in thought. "That would make me really sad. But you know what would make me even sadder?" "What?" "If they took them away and locked them up where nobody could ever see them again. Christmas ornaments are supposed to make people happy. If they're locked away, they can't do their job." Grixthal felt tears, actual tears, forming in his ancient eyes. This small human child had just articulated the fundamental flaw in everything he had believed about collecting and preserving beauty. "Emma," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "how would you feel if I told you that I could return Christmas to thousands of other children across the galaxy who lost their ornaments to someone like me?" Emma's eyes widened. "There are other kids who don't have Christmas? Many others. Children whose ornaments were taken away and locked up where they can't make anyone happy anymore." Emma didn't hesitate for even a moment. "Then we have to give them back their Christmas. Right now. But it would mean giving up some of the most beautiful ornamental treasures in the galaxy." "So," Emma replied with the casual wisdom of an 8-year-old, "Christmas isn't about having the most beautiful ornaments. It's about sharing the happiness they bring. If keeping them locked up makes other kids sad, then keeping them is the wrong thing to do." Grixthal looked around the Patterson living room, taking in the warmth and love that filled every corner. He thought about his cold, perfect collection chamber where thousands of stolen treasures hung in eternal silence, never again to bring joy to the children who had loved them. "You're right," he said finally. "It's time to return Christmas to the galaxy." He activated his communication device, connecting to his ship. "Assistant, prepare for immediate departure. We have work to do. Master, have you completed your assessment of the planet's ornamental resources?" "Yes," Grixthal replied, looking at Emma's excited face. "I have determined that this planet's greatest treasure is not their ornaments. It's their understanding of what ornaments are truly for." As Christmas Eve drew toward Christmas morning, Grixthal's massive collection ship began a journey unlike any in its 2-century history. Instead of collecting ornaments from new worlds, it was returning stolen treasures to the civilizations that had created them. The ship's vast cargo holds, once reserved for incoming plunder, were reorganized to safely transport delicate ornamental artifacts back to their rightful homes. But the real transformation was in Grixthal himself. The ancient collector had learned something from a human child that all his years of galactic travel had failed to teach him: that the true magic of Christmas wasn't in possessing beautiful things, but in sharing the joy they brought. Back on Earth, Emma Patterson fell asleep on Christmas Eve with her bedroom filled with the soft glow of Christmas lights, completely unaware that her simple love of Christmas had just sparked the greatest gift exchange in galactic history. And, high above, as Grixthal's ship set course for the first of dozens of worlds where Christmas, or its equivalent, would return after years of absence, The galaxy's former greatest ornament thief smiled for the first time in 2 centuries. He had finally learned the true meaning of Christmas. It wasn't about taking beautiful things for yourself, but about giving beautiful moments to others. The galaxy's Grinch had found his heart, and it was 3 sizes larger than before. Years later, when Emma Patterson was grown and had children of her own, she would tell them a story of the Christmas Eve when an alien visitor learned the true meaning of the holiday by watching her hang ornaments on a tree. Her children would listen with a wide-eyed wonder that children bring to the best stories, and they would learn the same lesson that had transformed a galactic villain into a force for joy across the stars. And somewhere in a galaxy, on a dozen different worlds, children would wake up on their equivalent of Christmas morning to find that their most treasured ornaments had mysteriously returned, bringing with them a message of hope from a reformed collector who had learned that the best way to preserve beauty was to set it free to make others happy. The greatest heist in galactic history had become the greatest gift exchange, and it all started with a little girl who understood that Christmas ornaments were meant to be shared, not hoarded. Emma Patterson had saved Christmas for the entire galaxy, simply by showing an ancient being how to smile.